William Samoei Ruto has spoken again, looking shaken about the escalating Niger coup that has pitted the West African nation against French, their colonies. In this podcast, we shall look at how the anti-imperialism movement sweeping West Africa is a red alert to the Kenyan situation. Ladies and gentlemen, the question that we've always been asking is why Ruto has always taken a double speak when it comes to handling other countries' affairs.
We broke away and we broke the chains of colonialism in our continent. And we broke the chains of colonialism because they were imposed on us without our will, without our wish. They were undemocratic. They were not participatory. They were against the majority will of the people of our continents, whether it is the Portuguese here in Mozambique or the British in Kenya. These were wills that were imposed on our people without their consent. Our position is that undemocratic, unconstitutional imposition of the will of any government of whatever nature on the people without their consent is wrong, the same way colonialism was wrong. And that Africa can only proceed into the future if we allow the people of our countries and of our continent to determine their destiny and to choose their leaders in democratic means, using democratic means. The way you do here in Mozambique and the way we do in Kenya and the way it is done in many parts of our continent. And therefore, as a union in the Africa Union, we are against any undemocratic removal of any government. Coups are not a panacea. They are not a solution to the challenges that we have as a continent. They are as undemocratic as the colonial masters. And we are taking a very firm position as nations, as the Africa Union. Any undemocratic removal of any government immediately earns the expulsion from the Africa Union. They cease to be members of the Africa Union. And as I said...
Now, if you look at that video, if you watch that video keenly, you will realize that Ruto sounds as if he is the spokesperson of the African continent, or rather is the African Union chair. And there is something you will have to realize. The African Union is not more vocal about the Niger coup, even though ECOWAS seems to be the only one handling now. I think for those who have not been following the Niger coup, let me bring you up to speed with what so far has happened and where the situation is, so that we draw a very good conclusion, or rather a very good observation in terms of Ruto's stake in the Niger coup. After the military coup that was staged by President Bazoum's own presidential guard, members of his presidential guard, ECOWAS gave 7 days ultimatum for Bazoum to be reinstated as the country's democratically elected president. But however, the members of the military team that then staged the coup did not heed to the calls of ECOWAS, because ECOWAS had said that if the ultimatum is not going to be met at the expiry of that ultimatum, they had threatened military intervention in Niger to restore constitutionalism. Now, that threat to storm Niger irritated Burkina Faso and Mali that have all been coalescing around Niger, and they're getting boost. Remember, these coups have been getting boost from Russia, and they have dared ECOWAS that if they dare try to meddle directly with the situation in Asia, then they're going to face a fight back, a historic fight back. If any foreign country is going to deploy military intervention in Niger, then they're going to join Niger in fighting back. Now, another development has been that the Niger has been, of course, creating a hostile environment, and they've been ejecting their former colonies French. So there is a united force of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, all fighting one enemy, which according to them is France. Efforts by the French to reclaim their support, their stake in the country, has actually hit a snag, despite of a support from US. So US has been supporting the mission by ECOWAS, and have also been trying to forestall the crisis by initiating some negotiation or some diplomatic talks between the two rivaling teams. And it has not yet materialized. Mali and Burkina Faso have all suffered. US have withdrew foreign aid to those countries, sent to Paris, the French capital, and there have also been the politics of visa. So the bottom line here is, William Ruto has said in that clip that colonialism was forced on Africans. Of course, to that extent, we all agree that colonialism was never an African affair. But he said that to the equal measure, and of course to that extent, he is supporting the coup. Because the coup is a plot against colonizers of Niger. So to that extent, he's supporting the coup. But he's also saying the same way they actually fought against the colony, they are also going to fight against coups, because coups are undemocratic methods of reclaiming power. Remember, all the colonial agreements between these countries and France has also been cancelled, while the Niger, with all the uranium resources in the country, it's still amongst the 5 poorest countries in the continent. So I even understand, I was watching some podcasts that even their central bank is based in Paris. So if they want to withdraw money, they have to get permission from France. That is how dire the situation is. But the wave of anti-colonialism is sweeping West Africa. And as Mutahi Ngunyi once warned, that this is something that is very contagious. Coup d'etats are very contagious, and before you know, it could hit even East Africa. Many soon may actually fear that it can land in our country, Kenya. But as William Ruto seems to be taking a firm stand against the coup, remember, it is a fallout between the members of the presidential team and his own military. So that is one aspect. Number two, it is also directly foreign infiltration, and China has been dominant because those who are backing the coup have been thronging the streets in Niger, carrying Russian flags and chanting Russian songs. So clearly, it's about a Russia invasion that is now ejecting France from Mali, from Niger. So ladies and gentlemen, in respect to this, why do you think Ruto seems to be threatened by a matter that I have said once and again and repeated? I have tried to look at exports and import measure between Kenya and Niger, and it's below par. Actually, we don't depend on them, and they really don't depend on us in what extent. So it's a matter that has not been so much associated with it. But when he went to Mozambique, he has mentioned about it. Of course, it is because for it to get an African angle, or it to get an African visibility. And another question that we keep on asking is Ruto the spokesperson of African Union? Because he seems to be speaking on behalf of African Union and taking positions of course he's speaking on behalf of IGAD, but also on the other side of ECOWAS. What exactly should Kenya actually learn from this? The current bipartisan talks going on, William Ruto needs to be the first and the last person to support the ceasefire and unity. A country can be torn in the middle if unity is not well embraced. Because look at what's happening there. We have a lot of extremism groups emerging. And even today, I think there's a story that I've been reading silently of some 10,000 Luos that went to court asking for them to be allowed to secede. And you know, these are things that emerge. Whatever is happening in West Africa is a plot to eject France. And France is getting, despite the fact that France is getting support from US. In fact, the Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger presidents have been insisting that they want United Nations to investigate the stake of France in those countries. And that has also gotten the backing of Italy. So you see how that is happening. One thing clearly is here is, as a country, if you're learning something from the coup, is that whenever the country is torn and loyalty and patriotism is not strong, it's an avenue that even other countries that can use, is a loophole that can easily be used to invade the country. Whatever is happening in Niger is going very successful because of the backing of Russia. Now, if you can't embrace ceasefire and unity, then tomorrow you realize that some Russia is also supporting another political front in the country. How would that look be? So I think if you really need, and in good note about what's happening in Russia, there is a bit of fear, and it's good to show the fear that because coups are very contagious. But then the most important thing we need to learn is we need to embrace those talks. In fact, that's one of the reasons why you realize that the British and the US and the West are actually supporting the talks in the country, because whatever is happening there is a threat from another enemy, who in his ugly face is Russia. So if that is also not allowed and the political crisis is escalating, I've been seeing a lot of not militarization, but let me use, a lot of brutal force. There have been protests, but these protests have been a lot of brutal force. Now, if things go south, it can be a wrong avenue for the neighbors to invade. Lastly, secondly is, we need to learn something from Niger. Niger has banned exportation of uranium to French. And the French colonies and the US, France and the US, has also suspended military aid, despite the fact that US had a military base there known as AFRICOM. So some time back, I think some 2 years ago, when a US army died there, passed on there, was killed there, is when even the Congress realized that they had an AFRICOM, they had a military base in Niger. They didn't even know. In fact, the legislators in the US were asking about the operation of that AFRICOM. So overdependence on foreign aids for a country is a big blunder. But if you can be self-reliant by streamlining our governance, and streamlining our governance, I will insist, is on a good expenditure and exploitation of our resources. Our foreign policies on such matters must be firm. I need to repeat this. We cannot comment and take a position on everything, and especially given that the magnitude of the France coup d'etat, the Niger coup d'etat is not an exclusively France-US players in it. There are also other international players in it. So while we are, of course, as a country, as a good neighbor, can also be concerned on whatever is happening to your neighbor, but we must have our foreign policy very firm. Otherwise, we might actually end up getting ourselves in some diplomatic squabbles, diplomatic troubles with world powers. And one of them is this issue of Niger. I still don't understand why it really bothers us. And as Ruto says, we don't support coup. Someone saying Is Kenya at the risk of a coup? I don't think we are there. Unless there's something I don't know. But I don't think we are in such, we are even at such a crisis or such a situation. So when we can comment and we can give a very firm position as a country, but we must also be sensitive to the fact that some of this crisis that is happening in Africa, like in Niger, is huge and it is bigger than what we think. I don't know how someone, an international relations expert, is going to interpret Ruto's message in Mozambique. Because on one side, you are saying colonialism was wrong because it was forced on the people. On the other side, you are saying that those that are chasing colonizers are also wrong. So where do you stand? That is why I'm saying we need to be a little bit firm instead of not being swayed by emotions or maybe friendships or relationships between us and other countries. That's my take.